Remember when you were a kid on a lazy Sunday afternoon, or certainly if you've got kids or had kids, you'll remember this. You know, when you or your kids go, "Oh God, I'm so bored." And then your mum would say, "Well, why don't you go and do something interesting?" And you think, "Yeah, brilliant, Mum, thanks for that advice." Jeez. Yeah, boredom. So what is it? Why do we get bored? And is it a bad thing? And what can you do about it? Boredom is something a lot of people fear, especially when they think about retirement or early retirement, you know, leaving a busy job and all of that. I know when I announced that I was retiring at work, there are a few people there going, "Oh my God, I couldn't do that. I think I'd be bored all day if I was retired and left work." And I even get comments on this channel now and then going, "Oh my gosh, aren't you bored all the time with nothing to do?" Trust me, I have stuff to do. And sure, I get it. 10 a.m. in the morning, coffee made, nice. Breakfast done, good. Exercise done, good. You've gone and walked the dog if you've got a dog, done. Tick, tick, tick. And then you think, what now? It's the great retirement paradox, isn't it? We work all our life for 30, 40 years to have all this free time. And when we finally get it, we can feel, I don't know, a little empty. Life is suddenly a little boring, apparently. For generations, we've been taught that boredom is the enemy. You know, it's a sign of a boring life. You know, you're a boring person. A person who finds life boring is a boring person. And today, of course, we have an infinite arsenal of weapons against it, right in our pockets. You know, we can doom scroll all day and get those little dopamine hits to kind of wave off that boredom and end up like goldfish gasping for air in a bowl. But what if I told you boredom isn't the enemy? What if it's actually a superpower? Oh God, Clive, he's going on about superpowers now, not again. No, trust me, I've done some fascinating research in all of this, as ever, and it turns out that boredom has a wild history, some very cool science behind it, and it might be the most important tool we have to build an amazing life in your 50s, or if you're retired or retired early. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's talk about why it's not just good to be bored, it's actually essential. Okay, quick history lesson. First off, it's worth looking at where we get the idea that boredom is bad. Well, it's had a terrible reputation for centuries. Way back with early Christian monks living in the desert, and they had a name for it called acedia. They called it the noonday demon. I mean, we've all had that noonday demon, haven't we? It's that feeling of listlessness and restlessness that made it impossible for them to focus on their spiritual duties. And to them, it wasn't just a mood, it was like a grave sin, a failure of their devotion, that they were distracted from their, duties, their prayers because of boredom. I mean, talk about pressure when you're a monk in the middle of a desert and you've got nothing to do. Fast forward a few hundred years later to the 18th and 19th centuries, and you're in the French court with your fancy powdered wig and fancy frilly shirts, and absolutely nothing to do. Then it was termed ennui, the feeling of ennui, one of my favourite words. This was a very specific type of world-weary boredom, as I said, felt by the wealthy aristocracy in their pampered wigs and frilly shirts, who had too much time, but not enough time to do it. And if you've read any Charles Dickens, then you've met characters who are bored to death by their privileged lives. For them, being bored was actually a status symbol. It meant you didn't have to work. Oh God, I'm terribly, terribly bored. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that boredom, the word of boredom, actually became an everyman's problem, an issue for the working man. I mean, before then, we had an agricultural society. We're too busy working in the fields to be bored. However, the monotony of the factory floor doing the same single task over and over again created a brand new widespread kind of boredom, So you see, for most of history, boredom has been seen either as a spiritual failure, a disease of the rich, or a curse of the working class. I mean, no wonder we're told to avoid it at all cost. I mean, I've defo had jobs which have been so repetitive, but science has asked, what is boredom actually? What is it really? Modern science has a very specific definition. It's not just a lack of things to do. Very windy up here today. Hope you can hear me. Boredom is the uncomfortable state of wanting to engage in something satisfying, but just being unable to do it. And this is the crucial difference. It's not apathy, where you just don't care or have no motivation. With boredom, you have all this mental energy, this restless desire to do something, but nothing seems to click. I look at my kids and they can play computer games. They've got computer games, they've got Netflix, they've got Amazon, they've got Disney. They've got so much, and yet they can get bored. It's because the brain's not clicking in. My son can play games all day and then all of a sudden, just be bored. He's been occupied for hours playing a game, but then just bored. And it's because suddenly the brain is sort of disengaged and unhappy, and it wants to click in to do something else. And here's the cool part. Neuroscientists have looked into the brains of bored people. I don't know how they do that, but anyway, and they found something amazing when it comes to boredom. When we're bored, the parts of our brain responsible for focusing on the outside world quiet down, and a whole different system in the brain lights up, and it's called the default mode network. Think of the default mode network, or the DMN as it's called, as your brain's internal exploration mode. It's what your brain does by, default, yeah? When it's not busy dealing with emails or traffic, it turns inwards. The DMN is the home of mind-wandering daydreaming, remembering the past and thinking about the future. So on that basis, boredom is essentially the neurological switch that flips us from the external doing mode to the internal reflecting mode. So it's not a sign of the brain is lazy or anything like that. It's a sign your brain is just disengaging from an unrewarding environment to do something important, some important internal maintenance in the brain. It's almost as if the brain has said to the body, okay, I'm going to set you off on autopilot, body. You know what you're doing. So I can go off and do some important stuff in the brain box. Okay, so our brain switched to this daydreaming network system, okay? Why is that a superpower, I hear you cry? And if I don't, I'm going to tell you anyway. Because this is where the magic happens. Research has shown that letting your mind wander in this way is a powerful catalyst for creativity. There was a famous study, apparently, where researchers had one group do a super boring task, basically copying numbers out of a phone book. I remember doing that once for some weird reason, history. Afterwards, they asked them to come up with creative uses for a pair of paper cups. Go figure. And it turns out the group that was bored came up with far more creative ideas than the group that wasn't. Why? Because when your mind wanders, it makes new and unexpected connections between ideas you didn't even know were related. It's like that aha moment you have when you're in the shower. That is your default mode network at work. So there's a cognitive benefit from boredom. I'll put this radar chart on the screen, which illustrates how allowing the mind to be bored correlates with boosts in creativity, planning for the future, and insightful self-reflection. It unlocks your mind's potential. One, it sparks creativity. Where the mind is understimulated, it seeks novelty, connecting disparate ideas to form new creative solutions. Two, it encourages future planning. Daydreaming allows us basically to simulate future scenarios, set goals, plan steps needed to achieve them without any immediate pressure. And three, promotes self-reflection. Boredom creates the mental space to think about our own lives, our values, our emotions, leading us to hopefully a stronger sense of ourselves. But there's a deeper purpose. Think of boredom like hunger or pain. It makes you feel uncomfortable for a reason. Hunger tells you, oh, I've got to eat. Pain tells you, take your hand away from the flame. It's the alarm bell telling you that what you're doing is not meaningful or satisfying. And it pushes you to find new goals and explore new things, and hopefully saves you from getting stuck in a rut. It's literally the engine of powerful personal growth. Such great views up here, isn't there? Anyway, this brings us back to retirement. Retirement is the perfect storm for boredom because the very things that used to structure our lives are suddenly gone. You know, I've talked about it before on this channel. Our professional identity for decades, what we did, was a large part of who we were. And as I've said, that can leave, for some people, that can leave a big hole. Our routine, the daily rhythm of our job, it gave our days a built-in structure, as I've mentioned before on this channel. And without it, sometimes the days can feel shapeless. And then there's a social life that we might have had in the office place or something like that. The workplace is an automatic source of social connection. And when that goes, well, it can just all feel a bit quiet. But as I've said loads of times on this channel, the challenge isn't about filling time. It's about consciously rebuilding the pillars that work once they've been provided for us. So when that feeling of boredom hits, right, instead of reaching for your phone and doom scrolling, see it as a signal, right? It's your mind telling you it's time to build something, not physically, but just to do something. And here's a blueprint of what might work for you, right? First, rebuild your purpose. This is the big one. Find new ways to continue and feel competent. Volunteering, mentoring, helping others, whatever it is. These can be a powerful way to feel needed and valued again if that's what you strive for. And then, of course, there's lifelong learning. You know, we never stop learning. Did you want to play that instrument? Should I dig out my old ukulele? I'm trying to learn Japanese. Do you want to learn a language? I'm getting more into philosophy, which is clear from this channel. You know, you can attend a class at college or whatever it is. It's about building a rich inner world so your mind has a fascinating place to wander when you are bored. I've mentioned it before. Become the architect of your day. You're the boss now, yeah? That's the beauty of retirement. You're the boss. The key is to be just a bit more intentional. Some people thrive on a new routine. You know, they love it. They set their times for waking. Okay, I'm going to wake at 7 a.m. every morning. They set times for exercise, set times for this and that. And that's fine. Others, you know, a bit like me maybe, love that total freedom from schedules. Maybe I'm sort of in between those two. The thing is, neither of those approaches is right or wrong, as long as it's a conscious choice. Choosing not to have a schedule is a conscious choice. That's the irony of it. You know, and sometimes a simple daily to-do list rather than a kind of a scheduled weekly kind of list is the way to go. Nothing complicated. Just a couple of things, 2 or 3 things you could write down, say, today, this is what I'm going to do, based on how you're feeling when you wake up. And then you can look to build your crew, you know, your new crew, your new gang of friends, whatever it is, whether it's through clubs or hobbies, hiking, playing pickleball, which seems to be all the rage, whatever it is, finding groups of like-minded people. And then find your flow, reconnect with old hobbies like, you know, I've done. I've really dived into kind of making videos. I used to make videos and stuff and have a YouTube channel when I was working. But now I'm not. I'm loving making these videos and stuff and editing. And sometimes I'm editing, and I've mentioned it before, I suddenly look up and 3-4 hours have passed and I think, oh my God. And yeah, basically I've got into the flow state without even realizing. So feeling bored is a signal, right? It's not a failure. Instead of immediately reaching for a distraction, use this sort of signal and this flow chart here to explore the feeling and turn it into a positive outcome. So, you're feeling bored, acknowledge that feeling without judgment and ask, do I have low energy? Check in with your physical and mental state. If yes, embrace rest and a bit of reflection. Let your mind wander, daydream, listen to music. Don't force activity, because this is where creativity emerges. So, the next time the noonday demon of boredom creeps in, don't panic. Don't immediately reach for instant distraction, yeah? Try to see it for what it is, a natural signal. It's a quiet moment, an empty stage, And it's inviting you to ask some important questions. What would be more fulfilling right now? What is it I truly want to be doing? In our working lives, we were carried along by a current of deadlines and demands. But in retirement, that current is gone. And yeah, for some, it can be a bit scary. But as long as you remember, boredom is the signal that we have now the profound and liberating opportunity to finally learn to swim in the current ourselves. It can be a compass that can guide us, hopefully, towards a new adventure, a new purpose, and, you know, hopefully a fantastic new chapter. So yeah, as I look out on this amazing scenery over here, I hope you haven't found this video too boring. If you've liked this video, then do me the great favor. Hit the likes, because I like it, YouTube likes it, and it helps people like you find content like this. And yeah, put any comments down in the comments below. We get a lot of comments, and I always love reading them. And if you're new to my video, then you know what to do. Please, could you hit the subscribe button, toggle the notification bell. Woo, windy. And that way you'll know when I go live with videos just like this. And talking of videos just like this, why don't you check out the videos here? These ones here. Woo, I think you'll love them. What a glorious, glorious day. Thanks for watching.